Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Olivia Carvalho, and I'm the Urban Outreach and Events Coordinator for Birds Canada. This event is part of the Toronto Bird Celebration, which is a 2-week-long festival of events that celebrates spring migration all throughout the GTA and through the magic of online event delivery. The Toronto Bird Celebration would not be possible without the very generous support of Birds Canada, TD Friends of the Environment Foundation, Koa Optics, and our amazing partners that organize so many events with us across the GTA and online. I'm going to invite you to please use the Q&A function during the duration of Kathy's talk. She'll save lots of time for questions at the end, and the easiest way for us to sort through those is if they're in the Q&A instead of the chat. We invite you to use the chat throughout to join in on the fun, and we'll see it in the Q&A portion of the evening. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Kathy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Olivia. My name is Kathy Jones, as Olivia said, and I'm the volunteer manager and biologist at Birds Canada, and I hope you'll find this presentation informative and interesting. We're also recording it so we can share it with others afterwards. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that I personally am at home, which is just northeast of Long Point on Lake Erie, and that is on the lands and territories of the Haudenosaunee, Adirondack, Anishinaabe, and Mississauga peoples, and I'm on the area of the 1792 Treaty 3, sometimes called the Between the Lakes Treaty. Now, the guests of this meeting come from right across Turtle Island, by the looks of it. So the loons come right across Turtle Island. So I invite you to use the link that Olivia is going to put on the screen for nativeland.ca and think about where you are located in the area. On behalf of all of Birds Canada and on behalf of myself in particular, I want to note that Birds Canada understands that Indigenous voices, knowledge, and ongoing work on the land is critical for wild birds to thrive in sustainable ecosystems, and that we support the needs, aspirations, and rights of Indigenous people to care for the land. So moving forward, I'm going to share today about Birds Canada's Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, and some other leading research. I'm also going to share about some of what I feel are the best ways to help loons and other birds at the cottage, lake, and at home. Now, I should mention here that these are not new information. This is, I'm not reinventing the wheel. These are things that many groups share about, and many groups with sound knowledge and advice that you can follow. I'm just amplifying their sound advice because their solutions and their knowledge provide the best information available. Now, whenever possible, I've added group logos, but I know there are many great groups working in these areas, and I know I've missed a considerable number of them. I also can provide public citations for the research that I mentioned. As well. So feel free to ask for that later if you would like that information. Yes, we have a poll. Please take them for a moment and complete the poll while I tell you a little bit more about Birds Canada. Birds Canada is a not-for-profit, and our mission is to drive action to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation. Is that poll working, Olivia? It doesn't show anybody filling it out on my end.
Yeah, I'm also seeing that. There is a countdown going. So let me play
there it
around with that.
goes. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the Q&A quiz. Oh, well. We're going to do this backwards. We're going to ask you all the questions first, and then we'll use them later to and answer all those questions for you. So please go ahead and add your information about what you think answer all to these questions, and we'll go over them at the end of the event. Life sometimes happens that way. So again, where was I? So Birds Canada is a not-for-profit, and our mission is to drive action to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of birds in Canada. One thing that we do very well for many years is deliver high-quality science-based projects. Presently, we have over 40 citizen science volunteer science, participatory science programs, whatever you'd like to call them, with at least one operating in every province and territory across the country. The way these programs work is that we train members of the public to conduct standardized bird surveys in the field, and then we put that information they collect to good work to advance bird conservation. Now, our large-scale monitoring programs informs us and many conservationists and scientists on how well birds are doing in Canada and around the world. Today's presentation will focus on just one of these citizen science programs, which is, of course, the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, and on the Canadian icon that we study, the common loon. The Canadian Lakes Loon Survey is also a core member of several loon and diver working groups. These groups have been established to share knowledge and move the science and conservation of the common loon forward. So the next few slides are about the leading science from our work and what others are telling us about loon populations and reproductive health. But I think we'll give it a few minutes first and have people finish off the poll. And I know some of those questions might feel off. You might find you learn the answers as we go through this meeting, but try your best to complete them. And we'll go over all those answers later as well.
It looks like the poll is about 75% completed.
Okay.
Would you like me to hit end?
I think so. That's good enough for us to answer questions later. And I'll just hold those off until the Q&A, so we have something to work with there if you guys don't give me a lot of questions. So yes, go ahead and end it. All right, and do we need to share results now, Olivia, or can we keep them for later?
I can turn it off and we can view this later as well.
Okay, perfect. That'd be perfect. Okay. So does that mean I can close it out on my screen?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, cool. So I'm hoping all you guys see a lovely loon and 3 logos about our working groups. Now I'm going to move into our science component of this, and which ended up being a little bit bigger than I thought because there's some brand new science out that I wanted to share with you guys. And don't let the fancy graphics overwhelm you here. So to begin with, though, I should tell you a bit about the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey.
Kathy, we're not seeing your slides.
You're not seeing my slides, so that might make a big difference. Thank you for telling me. So you guys missed all my cool loons. Oh, well, that's life. You haven't missed anything big yet. So hopefully, Olivia, you see what is Canadian Lakes Loon Survey up right now?
Yes, sir, with you.
Okay. So, what is the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey? The main reason for the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey to begin back in 1981 in Ontario was to assess the long-term health of common loons and the lake they depend on in relation to the negative effects of acid rain. And this still remains one of the main purposes of the survey, but it has grown and evolved to include monitoring in relation to an ever-changing suite of additional threats, especially climate change. The purpose now includes a strong contributions to on-the-ground loon and lake research and conservation as well. Now, what exactly do we measure? What the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey measures is we look at how well loon pairs produce and raise chicks to survive. Specifically, how many chicks make it to 6 weeks of age, which is believed to be the best age to measure how many chicks will successfully fly off the lake in the fall. Now, let's put that into a potential volunteer surveyor's perspective. What do you need to do as a volunteer? To participate, you need to visit the same lake at least 3 times during the survey period. More is better, but we know that 3 visits that are well-timed work. So once in June to see if the loons are on territory, once in July to see if chicks hatch, and once in August or 6 weeks after chicks hatch to get that important information on how many chicks survive to 6 weeks of age. On most of Canada's small lakes that have an active loon pair, this is really easy to do. It actually takes more time on larger lakes and on lakes where chicks are not surviving, as you need to ensure you don't miss any chicks or loon pairs. So back to the data. What have we learned? I've added this brand new graph here from the Breeding Birds Survey out of the Nature Counts Explorer system because I found it very informative. It shows similar patterns to what the 40-year report Canadian Lakes Loon Survey shows, which is a decline of loons in a large component of Canada. Now the consensus, moving away from the Breeding Bird Survey into the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey and other loon survey projects, the consensus is that overall, if the loon population is producing 0.48 6-week-old chicks per year, the population is stable. There's a lot of assumptions behind that estimate, but it's felt to be a good estimate and is likely close to the true value. I'm not going to go over the data in details. You're welcome to read in the 40-year report or any of the affiliated publications. But we are seeing a decline in loons across Canada, which is clear in both of these images here. The decline in Ontario since the early late 80s, shown here in orange, is minus 1.1% per year. That means loon productivity has fallen to about 0.45 in recent years. I know that sounds a bit funny, reporting numbers of part of a loon chick, but some pairs don't nest at all in some years, and others do, but don't produce any chicks. So the average works out to be less than 1 chick per pair. A good number is half a chick per pair, but as I said, it's now dropped below that half a chick per pair. Now we're working right now to figure out what exactly is causing the declines. It sounds simple, but exactly how complex can it be to study a single species populations for success? Well, I'd argue that it can be quite complex. Some hypotheses explain patterns of loon productivity and survival in specific populations, but it is largely a mystery as to why those patterns in loon productivity vary across the different regions of loons. Now, we do know, based on genomics work by Larison et al., that there are 6 unique North American common loon conservation units as seen here. And if you want to go over some of the cool differences later, I'm happy to share that with you. Now, we expect that the most important threats for each of these 6 units may vary depending on the unit. So right now, in addition to the larger research projects in Canada, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and in eastern US, we know that there are many other small subsets of loon populations being studied. So how do we pull this all together? To provide a more cohesive data to learn from about these regional patterns, the Loon and Diver Research Working Group, which includes Dr. Doug Tozer of the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, has started a project where a postdoc is looking at these regional groups and combined data sets for patterns of productivity and threats. Well, here's, for instance, based on all those different monitoring programs, we know that common loons have been declining for the past several decades in the Pacific Northwest, in central Canada, and in Midwest. Until this year, productivity has been stable or increasing slightly in eastern Canada and most of New England, shown in blue and purple, although not in the Canadian Maritime provinces where they've been decreasing. Interestingly enough, within the eastern US, in the New England region, we're seeing both declines and increases within the same population unit. Now, those current regional estimates are not published, so we're just basing a lot of this on information that our colleagues have shared with us. Further examinations of the mechanisms are needed, and this is the postdoc's job, and this will eventually come up with a really nice analysis that we can work at, which we hope supports how to better manage and how to better support the species. But there are many drivers of declines, including the issues I list here: lake pH, mercury, surface temp, deep water temp on the lake, ice off on the lake. Ice on is a new one that we recently discovered, and again, feel free to ask about that later. Water clarity on the lake and rainfall patterns are impacting loons. Black flies are impacting loons and may be impacted by climate change and black flies. Food availability, shoreline development, and boat traffic. Plus, there's other issues that we may have not even figured out yet. So let's go over a couple studies that are fairly well formed to give you an idea of how things are working. This is a brand new study, which is one of the reasons why I included it. And it's from Wisconsin and Minnesota, and it's from Dr. Walter Piper of Chapman's University. Now, Dr. Piper has conducted research on two populations of color-banded loons for a couple decades. And at the same time, when in Canada, we started seeing a decline in the chicks born, he started seeing fewer young loons, what we call floaters. They're just beginning to get into breeding stage, coming back into the survey area of the ones he's banded. So is our chick decline the same as his young floaters decline? We don't know. Now, Dr. Piper recently published in Ecology using a fantastic data set where he gathered up his information on loon chick health and other variables and compared them to a colleague's Landsat and satellite imagery work on many different features on the lake. And what popped out really, really clearly are a couple things. And one is that a significant increase of weather events, rain events, which is likely are climate change, and especially in the last few years, and that chick weight was down whenever the water clarity was not good in July. So this is probably the first really solid proof of the impact of climate change on common loons. And what it is telling us basically is that as you increase the water turbidity, and loons, which are a visual predator, they have to see in the waters column to hunt. So when you increase the water turbidity and the water is less clear, whether that's rain-off events or runoff or algae, they have less ability to see and they're less successful at foraging and hunting for fish. Now, if they're not foraging well, it decreases the chick weight. And when chick weight decreases, chick survival decreases. And that probably continues to be magnified when they hit the wintering grounds and have the 2 years on the wintering grounds on the ocean, and becomes an even greater problem. So back in Canada, where the majority of loons breed, there have been many suggested reasons why loons are not doing well in Ontario. Dr. Kristen Bianchini looked at all of these different potential drivers and published 3 publications on the work. And this is the core component of our 40-year report, which is on the front page of the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey website. There are many things that we all think should be a problem. And these things are likely a problem at a local lake level for a single small pair or a couple pairs of loons. But when you look at the larger population level of Ontario or Canada or Atlantic Canada or prairies, they are not the drivers of what's causing this decline in chick survivorship in Canada and Ontario. And Kristen explained that, Dr. Bianchini explains it very, very well in her documentation. Now, the leading hypothesis that we have, and we need to work on it more to get it beyond hypothesis. We believe that the declines in loons in Canada, specifically Ontario, is a multifaceted interaction where several pathways come together, including path damage of acid rain and our heritage chemicals, mercury pollution, decreasing water quality due to runoff and algal blooms, and climate change. All these things working together for lower chick hatch and chick survival. So that tells us a problem, and it's easy to be overwhelmed with the problem. But I believe there are many ways we can help. And this is the biggest take home I want for everyone today, is there are things we can do to make a difference. Now, what comes to mind to everybody when they think birds are in trouble? Let's give them habitat. And if they need habitat, that means they need a place to nest. But is this the case with loons? I don't want to negate nest platforms. Nest platforms work effectively when there is an issue with hatch and hatch alone. And specifically, they are good when there's a lack of nesting habitat, or more often, they are highly successful when there's flooding of nest sites. In New Hampshire, where they have over 157 platforms, they are expected to perform as well as a natural floating bog mat nest. So if we have natural floating bogs habitats, as many Canadian loons nest on, they will be equally successful. Platforms may also help a little with mammalian predations because they basically mimic an island and the mammals have a harder time getting there. But I would argue that they are more exposed to avian predators. But on your own lake, is that the issue? Is that the problem? Before even considering a platform, you want to ensure that you have all the other characteristics you need on the lake, the appropriate foraging habitat, the food supply, the places to hide chicks, the healthy, easy to visit, to see in water. Platforms also require a lot of maintenance and maybe a navigational safety issue if not located properly and monitored. So someone has to own the platform and take responsibility for it. Bottom line, before you build and place a platform, which may or may not be your best bet, do your research, know the loon ecology and behaviors for your lake. Check out our website for the detailed information on platforms and the standards, the Northeastern Loon Working Group standards. And reach out to a biologist such as myself who's familiar with the knowledge on these things to make sure you're on the right track for whether it's appropriate for your site and what is the best location. Again, more negatives, but we can turn that around really quickly. I really want to go over what you can do to help because sometimes this feels a little overwhelming. So I borrowed this term from the medical community, proactive care. Proactive care, in my mind, means working to prevent or mitigate a problem through limiting the stressors that make the problem worse. So it's a minimizing the impact by mitigating other problems. There are many proactive actions you can take, but I only have so much time. So I will provide you a quick explanation of 1 or 2 examples in each category, and you can do your own research. I'll give you lots of links at the end, and I have a PDF built that you can see that has all the links included. And like I said, I am not reinventing the wheel. A lot of these solutions have been suggested prior to my bringing them up. So let's start with proactive care at the lake. Let's look at the lake's edge. We need to ensure it's healthy for wildlife with shoreline buffers and aquatic plants near the shore in the nearshore waters. Naturalized shorelines prevent single point pollutions. They prevent phosphorus in the lake. They prevent erosion of the shoreline. And they provide habitat for many species, including the bugs that feed the fish that feed the loon. This is one area that is very important to loons that I think is often overmissed. And it's the most likely thing that I ask about when people question, why do we no longer have loons on our lake? I say, well, is there habitat? Is there marshes left? Is it hardened shorelines? Or do you have ribbons of life around the edge of your lake and buffers of vegetation along the shoreline? All those things are important to ensure the health of your lake. And I should mention here that loons are not only atop of the food chain predator, but we also feel that they are symptomatic of the health of your lake. And the reason for that is because loons, chicks, are only fed off the lake they are reared on. So if that chick is healthy, it's a really good indicator that the lake itself is healthy. If that chick is not healthy, most likely the problem is occurring on that lake it's being reared on. So proactive care at the lake and helping your lake this way will help loons and all biodiversity. It ensures healthy environment for all life, ensures fish breeding habitat, nesting habitat, and healthy water for drinking and swimming. It also improves carbon capture on the lake as well. Second, let's consider proactive care when on the water through thoughtful boating and fishing. One of the significant causes of death of loons and loon chicks is trauma. This would include other loons, collisions, drowning, tangling in line, and fish hooks. In addition, we know that wakes and other boating activities also impact shorelines and sediment levels in the water column. Proactive care on the water means being observant of other humans and animals on the water, creating fun zones for recreational boating away from the shorelines, and being cautious with wakes along the shorelines. This care mitigates wakes and sediment dispersion which helps humans, the water column, and wildlife, including loons. So getting into this a bit more deeply, um, both power and paddlers need to take care when at the water. Power boating can swamp loons, and loons nest close to water. A loon cannot walk. So when they nest, they try to nest so close to the water they have a quick escape. So they nest where they only have 6 inches of vertical up capacity for the water will only go up vertically 6 inches or down 12 inches. That's why loon rafts and floating sedge and bog mats work so well for them because they do float. So they go up and down with the water levels. Um, Also, paddlers and power boaters both can create situations when loon parents can't do their jobs as well. They can't protect or feed or care for the chicks because they're busy dealing with the humans. So in general, we recommend staying 30 to 50 meters away from a pair or a nest. The longer distance, the better. Those same things should be taken into consideration for all other wildlife on the lake as well. Really consider if that phone selfie is worth it, or whether you should just sit back, enjoy the bird, or pull out the big camera, or enjoy the calls of the lake instead. Now, through collaboration with the many lake users, I know it commonly says, well, the boaters don't want these things. Well, the boaters want healthy lakes. They want to enjoy that beautiful, pristine waters. They want to have places to enjoy their watercraft. So in collaboration with the other lake users, you can decrease harm and trauma to loons. You can help improve loon reproductive success and help with the lake quality and other wildlife. So let's talk more about wakes. You've heard me mention it a lot of time. Anybody who's on the water has heard lots of complaints about wakes, be it a regular boat or a wake boat or a wake surf boat. And I want to make it very clear, all three of those types of boats, any boat used incorrectly can cause harm. Used correctly in the appropriate environments, it's a much safer thing. Now, all boat wakes contain energy and have an impact horizontally along the surface of the water and vertically down in the water column. The goal is to prevent shoreline erosion, swamping, and the mobility of silt, mercury, and other pollutions coming up from the substrate at the bottom of the water, like the lake bottom, into the water column. Now, on a regular boat, a wake at its largest has enough energy to disperse in about 30 meters or 100 feet, which is why, frankly, Transport Canada has set regulations right across Canada, with only a few exceptions, that you can have no wakes in the distance of 30 meters running parallel to the shoreline. That's at 10 mile per hour rule within 30 meters or 100 feet of the shoreline. Now, depending on the situation in the lake and the ballast and the wake boat size and many other features, a wake boat, a wake surf boat can have a wake that needs 100 meters or 300 meters to disperse the wake's energy. So we now tripled the size of that of lengths you need from the shoreline or made it even farther. They also need a good 24 feet of depth in some lakes to prevent it from impacting the lake bottom. Now, these boats are fun, and it's a relatively safe sport compared to old school water skiing. So I get why people want to play with them. But here is a reminder of the effect in the next couple images. So what I'm showing you here is a wake from what I believe is a wake boat. This was taken in Vermont, I believe. Now you see in the left-hand corner there, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this object here on the left-hand corner, that's a floating nest platform. They're fairly small in this particular lake, but that's a floating nest platform for a loon. Now this is a little bit later. And you will see the angle of that platform that is clearly being impacted by the wake, likely the eggs rolled off or the nest platform was flooded out. So taking thoughtful care with your boats along the shoreline makes a huge difference for this species, for the vegetation, and for all the other people, other animals and people on the lake. Not only prevent this sort of situation, but to keep that water column healthy and brilliant and easy to see in. Well, I'll continue on. Um, so the next item to talk about I wanted was proactive care at the cottage and uplands. So you're at the lake, you don't spend all the time in the water, even though we want to, we do have to do other things. So there's care that you can take that adds another layer of protection to your lake by preventing point source pollutions and runoff and sediments and erosions, and basically naturalizing the environment that you're in, like Darwin Park's photo here. Increasing naturalized vegetation erosion upland helps your property values because they're gorgeous properties, as well as provides wildlife habitats and improves the lake quality and the fishing, breeding. You'll notice I mentioned fish a lot. And in the process, increases the habitat and food supply of loons. Now, the second picture there, the one on the left, um, is something I think we all need to be aware of. Bird collisions are very easy to prevent, particularly collisions with glass balconies and picture windows, and those stunning situations where you can see right through the whole house, and it looks like you can look through the whole house and see the lake on the other side. Birds do not see glass. They see the nature reflected in or behind the glass. So they often hit them at high speeds, which means death. Now, I would hope you are unlikely to see a loon hit the window, but we are looking at the big picture here of biodiversity again and that balance of nature at the lake. Again, this care at the cottage uplands help biodiversity in general, as well as the lake in general, and increases carbon capture. And you also get to see some wicked animals when you naturalize your shorelines like this. It will provide bugs and birds, which will help support this food web and the balance of life in your lake. Again, helping loons that way. So not everybody gets to go to the lake. Not everybody has a cottage at the lake. Not everybody, other people enjoy their summers and their recreation in many other ways. What can you do if you don't go to the lake? Well, you can take proactive care at the home and you still can make a difference. I cannot cover all the actions you can take, but I think one great action is to remember what you put on the land, the driveway, and garbage will end up in the waters downstreams, the lakes, the rivers, and eventually the ocean. So naturalize your home yard to decrease the point source pollutions, decrease the use of pesticides and fertilizers. Watch what you put down the storm drains. Remember that loons, like many of our birds, migrate and end up in the oceans and are impacted by these things in the oceans. We know that one of the problems seen in Wisconsin and Minnesota is that the young loons fledge off the lakes, but they don't come back when they're old enough to breed. So problems are occurring on the wintering grounds and during migration. Many of you have seen the images of animals whose stomachs are full of plastics or entangled and dying. By limiting the use of single-use plastics and properly disposing recycling, you can make a difference to all life. Not only can you help loons on the wintering area, but care at home can help other wildlife. You can help with some of the biggest concerns like collisions, as well as providing stopover habitat during migrations. Think of migration like trying to find a pit stop on a long drive. Those urban deserts are a real problem for tired and hungry birds. Larger, smaller, even micro gardens can help. Water sources are very important. These actions help many of the migrating birds that are declining, but also help our pollinators and carbon capture, which brings us back to that balance at the lake. Again, looking at the big picture, all those activities at home can help the entire food web and your lake in the long run. Finally, let's not undervalue the big picture ways you can help actively through advocating and monitoring. This is just a small sampling of the opportunities in Ontario you can support. In other provinces, there are similar opportunities as well. Many changes are happening in our governments on many levels, and advocating works through organizations such as FOCA, Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association, Lake Associations, ratepayer groups, and last but far from least, how you vote for the different levels of governments. Speaking up can and will make a difference. Also, assisting and financially supporting monitoring programs helps groups such as ours gain the knowledge and the opportunity to make a big difference. We not only have to get that knowledge collected from the lakeside, but we have to get it analyzed and processed and reported so you can share it with the community members that need to have it. And so any help you can on that support part helps. Also, just get dirty. Get involved with hands-on, active, shovels in the ground type of sport on your lake, the cottage social, and the community groups. That helps naturalize and improve the quality of the nature around you and everyone's environment, be it at the lake or at the home. And that way also biodiversity and not just loons are supported. No, I've said a lot, and I appreciate you all sitting here and listening to me, and I'm happy to go over many things. But finally, I need to thank a few people myself. First, Toronto Bird Celebration for hosting me on this platform. Second, the supporters and funders shown here on this slide, as they have helped cover expenses of our present loon research postdoc and supported our Quebec Oiseau partnership last year, and helped support our recent publications and 40-year report. Most importantly, and never to be forgotten, I need to thank the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey participants who gather all the wonderful data who we use and steward our Canadian lakes. I also thank Birds Canada supporters whose donations covered the majority of the cost of running the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey. I do hope everyone will consider supporting us through a donation to Birds Canada, particularly the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, or through supporting our annual stewardship campaigns. But please don't hesitate if that's not an option for you. There's a lot of other options as well. And that's pretty much it. If you want to come back on, Olivia, I don't think we should worry about the next poll. And I should mention to folks, though, that I talked a lot, right? So I do have a bunch of relevant websites and a list of references from this that I've shared. And there's a PDF that we have, and Loon Education and Stewardship materials. Olivia's already put it online. All that information is in a PDF on that website as well. I will stop sharing. And hopefully we have questions.
Would you like me to bring up the poll results from earlier as well?
Yes, unless we have some immediate questions. That'd be terrific.
I'll pull that up while folks use the Q&A feature there.
All right. I did get some questions beforehand. Let me see, what were they? How do loons contribute to our lake ecosystems in Canada? I think I covered that. They're a top food chain predator, and they also show us the health of the lakes. How to prevent campers on islands from impacting the loons, and the poll results might help us with that. Okay, let's go over the poll results. Can everybody see that? Or just me? All right, to start, why do loons nest on the water's edge? Well, they can't walk. That's the first one. Their legs are pushed very far back so that they swim very, very well, but walking is not their forte. Do they do it to avoid predators? Sort of, but yet it's more of a case where they want to be close enough to the water's edge so they have a quick escape. So they do avoid predators, but the biggest deal is they just can't energetically afford to walk very far if they can get away with it. Most significant cause of loon deaths: lead poisoning, botulism, we don't know for sure. Trauma. All answers are good. We sort of don't know for sure in Canada. A lot of the information we share is based on studies in the US. I will acknowledge that. But we believe in Canada, and based on the mortalities that we have seen, that the most common cause of death is trauma, which would include collisions and more likely being wrapped in fishing line, fish hooks, and the impact of other loons. Botulism has been high profile, but it doesn't have as big of effect. And we haven't had a big event of botulism for several years now, which I'm on a glass desk, but knock on wood, that will continue. Uh, lead poisoning is another big problem. And I think it cannot be underestimated. It's a huge impact in the States. To give you an example on lead poisoning, in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, it used to be their loons, the most likely reason their loons would die was lead. It's in a place where they could bring in a law that says no more lead fish hooks, no more lead hunting, no more lead anything. And that problem no longer exists. And their loon success and survivorship has ramped way, way up because of that. Maybe later I will tell you what is now their most common cause of death. And we don't know for sure. Yeah, we'll never be absolutely certain because Canada is a massively huge country and many of our loons die in places that we never hear about. So we can only report on the proportion of loons that are found and hope that that extrapolates out to show what the whole population is seeing. Do we have any other questions or should I continue?
We have a couple in the Q&A and I'll pop them into the answer live. So the first question is it possible to check the data from other lakes taking part in the loon survey?
Possible for me? Yes. Possible for you? No. Right now, all data exports and review has to be done from the Birds Canada in-house environment. It's not part of the data, it's not part of the data export system that Nature Counts provides. It's quite lovely. I would question as to why you'd like to see that, but certainly it's worth talking to me or Doug Tozer about it, and we can see if you help. The biggest question I have is how you interpret the data and what are you hoping to find from it. So it's certainly, you can ask. I would advise asking in the summer or the fall. Don't ask in February to May because I have 4 programs at that time and I just ignore all data requests at that time.
Great. Okay, the next question we have is, has avian bird flu had any impact on loons so far?
That is a really excellent question. We thought we were going to dodge that bullet. Until November or so, and this is the advantage of being part of those 3 working groups. We have lots of information to share. Until November of last year, there was no active occurrences of HPA1 in loons, but they had 9 in the last few months. So at this point, we don't think it's a huge impact, but HPA1 is changing so quickly, we can't say for sure.
Great. The next question we have is, how do black flies negatively impact loons?
Oh, this is a water piper report, and you can look it up or check his website, what's his website called? I'll have to look it up. I'm sure it's in the stuff I've provided in the links that I will provide. Loons have their own black fly, and it only affects loons, and it's got a special name and everything. If the number of black flies gets too extreme, they will abandon the nesting site and abandon nesting for the year. And there is a way that Water Piper and his crew, I kind of feel sorry for the students, tested this where they would look in a screen and count the number of black flies on a loon's head and make an indication of when it was so bad they would escape. They found that in cold and cloudy and very wet spring conditions, you are going to be more likely to see loss of nesting caused by black flies. Now, for those who, climate change modeling is very complex. And one of the things is it shifts the patterns in the spring. And this is where this may be a climate change impact, is because we're seeing a shift in the rain patterns in the spring, and which may be impacting when we see those black flies.
And I'll pop the link to that post in the chat here. But the next question we have for you, Kathy, I'm learning so much tonight, is just curious where there are successful loons in the area. And I'm assuming this is a Toronto-based question.
Oh boy. There is none, basically. Lovely idea. The reason being is you're too far south. You, like me, are below the normal range of the loon breeding in Canada. With that said, I know there's a pair in Luther Marsh, which is not too far away. Whether they're successful this year or not, I don't know. I know there's a couple gravel pits in the Greater Toronto and the Golden Horseshoe with loons, which is very surprising. So it's hit and miss. I would recommend, if you want to see loon pairs that are successful, just go on eBird in late June and see where people are seeing loons. That's the best thing to do.
Awesome. I don't have any others that are active in the Q&A, but I feel like you should answer one of the important questions from the poll, which is, what is the best thing you can do for loons?
Fine enough. And I'm going to just roll down the results here. It's pretty easy. Work with your lake users to ensure that the lake is healthy and cleaned. And everybody's working together to make sure that people can use their boats well and the shoreline's protected and the water column's protected. Trying to get rid of, trying not to get rid of, but trying to ensure that garbage and fishing line and tackle are properly recycled. Working with groups like Clear Your Gear is great for that. Now, if you want to hold up a sign at the end of the docks that says protect loons, I think that's great. But I think people, well, first off, they're going to come really close to see it. And it may not help you that much in the long run. I think it's always best to try to educate the whole group through social media and flyers and events like this one than it is to try and reach out to only one person at the time when they are doing something wrong. It's better to do it beforehand. I guess, is there more questions, or I can go over some more of these results? Let me see. So how do paddlers and sometimes powerboaters impact loon tick care? Well, they surprise and panic the parents. All three were right. They surprise and panic the parents. They can separate the parents from the chicks. When you separate the parents from chicks, there's a couple things happen. One, they're more than capable of losing a chick. Two, the chicks don't have that protector around them to protect them from predators. And three, that chick is not getting fed, so it's much more vulnerable. And if the loon thinks you're a threat, whether you are or not, it prevents them from looking for other threats. So I thought it was an important one. And this was one of the questions that was asked pre-survey, pre-webinar. There are loons on an island. What can I do to keep people and the dogs off? Well, these answers are good, except for one. Put signage on the island. And I tell you, if you put signage on the island, how do people read it without bugging the loons? So it's a common sense solution, just it doesn't work. So you want to pull your signage off the island, put it on buoys, and I have signage I can share on that if you really need it. The first solution is always keep the location quiet because they're well hidden. But pull the sign if you have to have signage, pull it off the island, put it on buoys, put it out just for the nesting season, and then give all the other people on the lake a break and take them down afterwards. Because once the loons are off that nest, they are unlikely to go back. And of course, educational campaigns always help.
Kathy, I have two more questions in the Q&A for you. And the first is, do Canada geese negatively impact loons?
I don't believe so. I have seen loons take over Canada geese nests, and I have seen loons, or I shouldn't say I've not seen any of them. I've heard of loons taking over Canada geese nests and kicking them off. And I've heard common loons ignoring the Canada geese on the nest. So it all depends on the pair. Now, I know in some places in the US where they highly manage for loons, remember that all those eastern US sites that have such good populations right now, those are actually fringe sites. They're almost on outside the range. So they manage heavily for them, and they will stop other species from going on the nest in the spring. But I think loons, especially if you're in Eastern Canada, and I mentioned before about those population units of loons. Loons in Eastern Canada have a considerably heavier body mass than in Western Canada, and so they're more than capable of fighting and winning with the Canada goose. Perhaps the prairie ones, which are much more dainty, are less likely. So maybe it depends on where you are.
So interesting. I'm learning so much tonight. I have one final question here from the Q&A. How do I find out if the loons on my lake are already monitored?
That's a tough one. And the reason it's tough because we've always allowed people to choose where they're surveying at the time they're surveying, and they don't tell us until after the data comes in. We do have a map on the website, and you can see if they've been monitored recently. Not including last year. I haven't got last year's data updated yet. But we will not know for sure who's monitoring in 2024 until the end of the year. But all in all, we don't have that much overlap. And you know what? If we do, we have I was just talking to Doug about this today. We have mechanisms within the system to accommodate that and merge the data. So especially if you're only doing a section of the lake, but even if you're doing the whole lake, we can make the data work on our end if we end up with duplicate data. And all it takes is one wedding and one vacation, and it totally mucks up your season at the lake. So sometimes it's helpful knowing there's somebody else on the lake.
Awesome. That's all we have for the Q&A. If you'd like more information on the loon survey itself and how to get involved, you can go to birdscanada.org/loons, and I've posted that link in the chat as well. Kathy, do you have anything final before we sign off?
I'm just looking at the questions here that's left, and I won't go over them. I think we've covered most of everything. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing that. And I want to thank everyone for coming. I don't know how many people we ended up with, but it's been lovely to talk to people, and I hope you found it informative and helpful.
We have one person raising a hand. I don't know if that's intentional or not. But I'll invite you to connect with Kathy after the webinar then. Or you can unmute yourself. I'm not sure if that's an option on here. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, this person should be allowed to ask a question. Go ahead, Joanne. Okay, maybe an accident. Right. Okay. That's it for us tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining Kathy to learn more about the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey and the work that's happening at Birds Canada. This event is part of a much larger celebration, the Toronto Bird Celebration, and we've got events happening the rest of this week and next on to the 25th. 10 more days of celebration going on. So head to torontobirdcelebration.ca to register for more events. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.